All right, so again, yeah, we're gonna have people trickle in. I appreciate. I know it's the end of a long day. I know some of you are just finishing your classes. Some of you might be on the move. I know some people told me they were going to get on their phone for a little while and join. Perfectly fine. It's this isn't super formal, so do what you got to do over these next 2 hours. But I think you're going to find the information we present pretty compelling and pretty interesting, I hope. For those who don't know, I am Aaron Standish. I am the K-12 Financial Literacy Program Planner here in the School District of Palm Beach County. This is a job I've had for the past 10 years. I feel very fortunate. It's a fantastic job to have. It's my 23rd year here working in Palm Beach County. I was a classroom teacher for the 13 years prior to that. But this actually, what we're doing today is not typically part of my job, to be perfectly frank. Typically what I do, for those of you who I don't typically support, is I typically support teachers who are teaching personal finance material to students. We do it kindergarten up through 12th grade. We've got a lot of different personal finance programming. So we do some in school, we do some out of school programming, we do some community programming, we do all sorts of personal finance programming. But I've started doing these sessions for specifically just for teachers as well. And the reason is because we used to do a lot of PD for teachers, in which we'd show them how to use a program with students, teach them about the standards and stuff like that. And then teachers would always stay after 30 minutes, an hour, sometimes 2 hours to ask questions. And the questions were never about how to teach it or the programs. I mean, they were sometimes, but we especially got people staying after to ask personal finance questions. Hey, this person's in my lunchroom. Who are they? They sold me this product. They would bring in statements and show me the statements. What is this? I don't understand it. Why is it not earning any money? Right? Things like that. And so, that really began sort of a years-long journey that I took, and to figure out, well, where are teachers getting their personal finance knowledge from? And I realized not many places. Teachers are no different than a large portion of the American population, and that have relatively low levels of financial literacy because we weren't taught it growing up. That's my story, right? I became really interested in personal finance because I made some really big, really poor decisions as a young teacher. All right, I remember making $38,000 and taking on these loans and getting in these debts that I just couldn't pay off. I literally can remember being a young teacher having to choose which stack of bills I was going to pay every single month. That was my reality for a while. Luckily, eventually I started teaching economics and became really interested in money. Eventually went and got my master's in economics, and then became really interested in personal finance as well. And my first order of business was to get my own personal finances in order. And then once I got my own personal finances in order, or as much in order as I could, I started to want to help other teachers. I'm surrounded by educators in my life. I'm married to a teacher here in the district. My parents worked in schools. All my good friends are teachers. So, I became quite angry when I started to find out exactly how some of these teachers are being treated by these salespeople that were coming into their mail rooms and selling these 403 products that are just quite honestly substandard, and products that probably shouldn't be available. So we set out to do sort of these educational experiences, or these educational sessions, where there's not a single salesperson on this call. All right, I work for an educational institution. I work for the school district. Right, I'm not selling anything. You've got Dan Otter, who's going to speak next. He works for a nonprofit, 403BY. So you can't sell anything for his nonprofit work. We've got Jill Persson and Lisa Roberts. They're here from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. All right, that's a government entity that regulates financial markets. They're not selling products. All right, and so that's unique, right? A lot of these financial education sessions that take place in the district, full disclosure, they're put on by salespeople. Whose number one goal is simply to sell you a product. So that's why I started to do these here and there, is just to as much as we could to help out teachers, just to provide strictly education. Before we start in these next 5 minutes, I'm just going to real quick give a plug for what I primarily do, which is primarily personal finance education in the classroom with students. So I just wanted to show you a few things in case we have some educators on here. I know some of our personal finance teachers are on here, so that's always a good thing. So I know we have a number of teachers in here that teach personal finance. I also know we have a number of teachers in here that don't teach personal finance, and that's okay too. But I just wanted to show you some things available to maybe if you're interested eventually in teaching some personal finance topics in your classroom. So on the left, you see our Financial Literacy Month flyer. We've got all sorts of activities going on in the month of April. By the way, I didn't even say Happy Financial Literacy Month. It started April 1st. We are officially in Financial Literacy Month. So take a look at that. You're going to get a link to this presentation. It'll be hyperlinked where you can look at that. The main flyer you see there, that's we're doing this special 3-part session for teachers' own personal finances. So you're here on part 1. Part 2, if you're interested. So really today we're going to take sort of a macro look at the 403B. Talk about sort of what is it? What exactly is a 403B? What are some of the basic investments you can put into a 403B? Dan's going to look at our own 403B in the school district of Palm Beach County and talk about the vendors that are available, which ones are considered, they have their own rating system, considered green vendors, which ones are red vendors. So we're going to look at both it from like a macro level in terms of just in general what it is, and then a little bit of a micro level too in terms of what does it look like in our school district. Then on not this Monday, but the following Monday on April 15th, we'll do another virtual session. We'll have the same presenters. So Dan will be back with one of his partners, Scott Downhauer, who's a fiduciary CFP. Lisa and Joe will also be back from the SEC. So we have another all-star lineup of presenters for that one. And then we'll be a little bit more focused on the actual investments that are within 403B products. So you're going to look at those a little bit today, but we're going to do a more expanded look at those on the 15th, and even some look at some investments outside of 403Bs as well. And then we're going to do an in-person session on the 30th of April, the very last day of Financial Literacy Month, on the Florida retirement system. I'm going to do that one for you. That's the FRS. I'm certainly not an FRS specialist or expert, but I do know that I typically have a little bit more knowledge about the FRS from doing these sessions than a lot of teachers do. So just trying to do a brief education session on what is the Florida retirement system, what's the pension plan, what's the investment plan, what is drop, how do I get paid in retirement, how long should I work, just some simple things like that. That one will be in person. So that if you want to sign up, that's on e-learning, you can sign up. There'll be a stipend. Most of our in-person ones have stipends, so you can get a stipend for that one, $25 an hour. And I usually bring food too. How can you go wrong? I'm going to pay you and feed you. All right, so you can sign up for e-learning on that one as well. And then just so you know, I hear it a lot, man, why don't we do more personal finance in the schools? I wish I had learned this. Why don't our schools doing more of it? I'm really tired of hearing that because we do a lot of it. All right, I understand why you hear it. There's still a lot left to be desired, but we do a lot of personal finance programming in our schools from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. And then this is just showing you sort of some of the stuff we do here in our district. We've got quite a few high school courses that are personal finance focused. This year's incoming freshmen are required to take a personal finance course before graduation. That's a new Florida graduation requirement, if you knew that or not. All right, this is pretty cool. So those first 2 courses are 2 of the required courses that they're going to be able to take. The next one, this is called personal finance. We also have 4 finance academies in our district. So 4 of our high schools have finance academies. That's for someone that might be looking for a career in finance specifically. So we have courses available there as well. And then starting last year, we also have a math course. It actually counts as a math core course. So it counts as a required credit for graduation for math. That's called Math for Data and Financial Literacy. It's obviously looking at financial literacy from a very math-focused perspective. So that's a cool course as well. And then in the middle school, we have an Introduction to Financial Literacy course. So I think we have 7 middle schools offering that course this year. So we keep expanding that. And then Brian and we also support career and education planning, which is a required component of that a student must take before leaving middle school. In our district, it's done in 8th grade social studies classes. So we do a lot of the support for those 8th grade social studies classes to do career and education planning. And then even at the elementary level, we've got a bunch more things available as well. In 4th grade, we've got required benchmarks now, which is fantastic. We worked for years at the DOE to try to get them to get those on the report cards. They're now on your standards-based report cards. If you're a 4th grade teacher, those show up in your standards-based report cards. And not only that, every single one of our grade levels, K to 5, has economics benchmarks. A lot of them have financial literacy concepts in them. So we have a huge variety of different elementary programs to help incorporate personal finance concepts. If you're a high school teacher, you can look at this page. This has got almost all of our high school resources. We don't put it behind a paywall. We don't hide it anywhere. We give it out there to everybody who wants to use it. So there it is. Here's all of our middle school resources. for everybody who wants to use it. And then we've just recently finished up I think it's a 45 slide deck on K-5 resources. So this is just the title page, but you can click what's in highlighted there to get the entire 45 slide deck to have a huge suite of resources, K-5, very comprehensive. If personal finance is something you're really interested in, even if you don't teach it, and you're really in need of some in-service credit points, we created this program where you can get in-service credit by taking these on-demand PD modules. This is done with our partners at Next Gen Personal Finance, NGPF, and Dan will probably talk a little bit about them as well. They've been gracious enough to allow us to use these. We set them up in our PD system so that you can access them directly in eLearning, and you can earn 2 in-service credit points for each of the 20 modules that we made available. So you can get up to 40 in-service credit points for doing these modules. That's amazing. A lot of these, they're not focused. They're not made for students. They are made for adults, right? So this is strictly to learn more about personal finance content. It does say you can also earn a stipend. The stipends, I will say, are limited to only those who teach personal finance or who are getting ready to teach personal finance. So you might not be eligible for that, but everybody's eligible for the up to 40 in-service credit points. And so these are all 20 that are available. Some of these are going to be more relevant to you than others. I highlighted the ones that I think, especially considering what we're talking about today, that I think will be especially relevant to you. All right, so not only could you learn a lot more about personal finance, you can get some in-service credit. All you have to do to get the in-service credit is finish it and upload your certificate through it. So please take a look at those. All right, that's the end of my spiel. I'm going to, in a second here, turn it over to our all-star group of presenters here. I'm going to do just a quick setup to Dan, and then I'll let Dan take it over. What I'm showing you here, what we're here to talk about today is how to prepare for your retirement. All right, this is something that I don't care if you're 21 or 61 years old. You should be preparing for the money that you may have to live off of in retirement. And so this is sort of an old-fashioned way of looking at retirement, and it's that three-legged stool of retirement. Now, one of those legs doesn't exist for most people today, which is the pension. But guess what? It does exist for you. That's why I'm still showing it. All right, you are very lucky as a public school teacher, all right, to still have access to a pension. Now, some of you don't have a pension. If you're in the investment plan, that's technically not a pension, but we'll talk about that on April 30th. So you have that first leg of the stool pretty well taken care of, right? If you work a full career as a teacher, that'll replace maybe 30% of your income or so, right? Maybe more if you work longer, all right? That second stool, which is paid by the government, you probably know what that is. That is Social Security, right? You are lucky, and not all teachers get Social Security because not all teachers pay into Social Security, all right, in all states, all right? We do. All right, so you will also have access to Social Security. If you work a full career, that's going to replace maybe 35 to 40% possibly, depending on how long you work and a couple other factors of your income. So you have, 65 to 70% of your pre-retirement income taken care of. But think to yourself, is that what you want to live off of? Is that the life you imagine for yourself in retirement? 65 to 70% of the income you make right now? Most people say no. Right? Most people have larger plans for retirement, right? They want to go travel extensively. They want to spend lavishly on their grandchildren, right? There are a lot of other things you have planned. So that third leg of the stool is what we're here to talk about today, right? And that is, what are you doing to save for retirement, right? And when I say retirement savings, I'm talking about tax-advantaged retirement savings, right? Sure, you could put it in a savings account, a CD, right? These aren't tax-advantaged savings plans. We're talking about things that the IRS creates for you that allows you to have tax-free growth over the years, right? It could be an IRA, which is an individual retirement account, which would be something you get on your own, right, through really any financial company you want. Or what we're here to talk about is another tax-advantaged retirement plan that's only available through your employer, and that's a 403B account. So that's why we're here to talk about a 403B account and what they are today. So with that being said, I am going to stop sharing my screen. I am going to turn it over to Dan Otter. Dan is the founder of 403bwise.org. That if you've never heard of it, I'm very hopeful that after you walk out of here today, you will not walk, but run to your computer to get on all the great resources that 403BWise provides. So you can take it over from here, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, what a wonderful beginning. And Aaron, I say it every time, but your district is so fortunate to have you. You are an amazing person, an amazing resource. And again, I joke that we need to clone you. We need AI Aaron so we can put you into every school district. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining me. I know that you just got done teaching. It's a long day, and I'm going to try to make what I show you worth your time. So let's go ahead and get started. But first of all, I want to wish everyone a happy 403B Day, April 3rd. As I told Aaron, ironically, this is my daughter's birthday. So what are the chances? She turned 26 today. Okay, I'm going to start off with two provocative questions. Can you teach and retire rich? We actually think you can. And are you making the $306,000 savings mistake? Even if you are, I'm going to show you some ways to correct it. Here's what we're going to look at today in my brief talk. I'm going to show you the Teach and Retire Rich formula. I'm going to look at the 403B and the 457B side by side. These are two very powerful wealth building tools if used properly. We're going to talk about this mistake and how to avoid it and or correct it, and then I'll take your questions. Quick disclaimer, nothing presented or discussed is to be construed as investment or tax advice. This can be secured from a vetted fiduciary advisor. At a minimum, your advisor should hold a CFP. The folks you're meeting in your staff lounge, the folks that are probably emailing you, these are not fiduciaries. These are sales agents. I will share a resource that we have at 403BWise, which will show you how to find the right kind of advisor. We also have a list of questions you can use in your search to find the right kind of advisor. All right, let's go back in time when I had dark hair. That is me in the early 2000s. It is here where I first learned about the 403B. We did not have an Aaron Standish in our school district. What we had were a lot of sales agents, and they would come flooding into our schools. They literally came to our classrooms after the students had left, and that's how I first heard about the 403B. A woman asked me a question that I will never forget. When she poked her head into my classroom, she said, "Do you care about your financial future?" Of course, there's only one answer, and I said yes. She took that as an invitation to come into my room and proceed to tell me about something I had no idea about. I had some vague notion about a pension, but I knew nothing about what she was trying to sell me. I politely listened and said I would get in touch if I was interested. Lucky for me, I did not get back in touch with her because she was peddling high-cost annuity products in something called a 403B. As I began to self-educate myself, just like Aaron, I got angrier and angrier, and I vowed to do something about it. So in 2000, I launched a website called 403bwise.com. The whole goal was education and advocacy. We wanted to be a place where teachers could come and learn about this powerful wealth building tool in a non-sales environment. Pretty soon after launch, we got mentioned in US News and World Report, and then I got interviewed on an NPR program. So I had a feeling that what we were creating with 403BWise was helping teachers. So speaking of teachers, I continued to teach. I earned a master's. I earned a doctorate. And then in 2015, the New York Times reached out to my partner, Scott, who's not with us today, unfortunately, but will be on the 15th. And these reporters wanted to talk to us about the 403B. They had heard some not so great things. And so over the next year, we worked with them, gave them resources, ideas. And then in 2016, that publication released a series of articles on the K-12 403B. It was fantastic. As you can imagine, so much attention on this plan, so much attention on 403BWise. And to our great fortune, someone that Aaron has already referenced, Next Gen Personal Finance, their co-founder, Tim Ranzetta, read these articles. He was horrified to hear that the very teachers he's working with and helping teach personal finance were being taken advantage of in their 403Bs. So Tim reached out to us and asked if there was anything he could do to support us. He proposed making 403B Wise a nonprofit, and he would fund it. I joked that we already were a nonprofit. But thanks to Tim, I was able to leave my teaching job and do this full time. And I just want to share real quick some progress that Tim and his team are making. Right now, half the states in the country are now requiring a personal finance class. In California, we have it on, it's going to be on the November ballot, and we hope that passes so that we can be like Florida and make personal finance instruction a required class. So thanks to Tim, we became a nonprofit in 2019. I left my job at the University of Redlands. We transitioned from a .com to a .org, and I want to emphasize we sell no products or services. All right, here's the formula to teach and retire rich. Aaron talked about the pension. You also have two very powerful wealth building tools available, the 403B and the 457B. And I'm going to talk about these two plans. One of my favorite teaching tools is the Venn diagram. I've used that with elementary kids, middle school kids, high school kids, and college kids. I love the simplicity and the power of this teaching tool. So what do these plans have in common? Well, this year you can contribute more than up to $23,000 to each of these plans. If you're like me and over age 50, you can contribute an additional $7,500 to each plan. You can contribute on a pre-tax basis, which will lower your taxable income, or you can contribute on an after-tax Roth basis. While it won't give you that upfront tax benefit now, when you take the money out in retirement, you will not pay taxes on that. You also could invest in mutual funds with both of these plans. If you are working and you are age 59 and a half, you can begin to take withdrawals from each of these plans. As I mentioned, you can contribute to both of them, and you can take out loans. There are some more differences, but probably the most significant difference between these two plans is with the 457B. You can access this money tax penalty free at any age when you separate service. I'm not encouraging you to leave your school district, but if for some reason you need to resign your position, regardless of your age, you could be 25, 26, 27, you can access your 457B money. You'll still owe taxes on the withdrawals, but you won't be penalized. With a 403B, you would have to wait until age 55 to access this penalty-free. All right, so imagine, and the picture I'm going to paint here is definitely an outlier. Do not feel like this is something that most teachers do. I just want you to know what is possible. Imagine contributing $23,000 to a 403B, the same amount to a 457B. You're over age 50, so you can do an additional $7,500 into each of these plans. I'll give my math teachers a moment here to do a little mental math. And I have a feeling you probably all got it. You could contribute up to $61,000 in 2024. Again, not many teachers are doing this, but I want you to know what is possible. Okay, meet a couple friends of mine. Actually, they're colleagues of yours, hypothetical colleagues, of course. There's Frank on the left. There's Ashley on the right. They're both age 22. They both were hired at your district. They both start a 403B. The assumptions of their investing are all exactly the same. They each contribute $5,000. They're both in the same type of investment. They both earn a 7% annual return, and they both contribute to the 403B until age 60. Frank accumulates more than $500,000. Not bad, Frank. But Ashley accumulates more than $800,000. Wow, that's a big difference. Why? I'm going to come back to that in a moment. All right. Here were the financial companies they and you have to choose from. And frankly, your list is kind of small as the 403B goes, the K-12 403B, that is. In the town I live, Redlands, California, there are more than 40 financial companies. This is insane. If you work at an employer with a 401k, you have one financial company that has been vetted by your employer. That is not the case with the 403B. It's been described as the Wild West. So look at all these companies that you have. And each company could offer dozens and dozens of investments, very complex. How good or bad are these financial companies? Well, this is probably one of the top questions we've gotten at 403BY since our launch. And we finally decided to do something about it. Actually, my partner, Scott, finally decided to do something about it. And he came up with what I think is an ingenious way to rate the vendors and the districts. So we wanted to make it simple. And we decided to use the traffic light system. You know, red light, you're driving your car. What do? You stop. In California, that's not always the case. If it is yellow, hopefully you proceed with caution. And if it's green, I still recommend you look around to make sure no one's running their red light, but green generally means go. So this is the system we decided to adopt. We rank the vendors according to how good or bad they are. So if you are a red vendor, we indicate it with this list here, and we break it into red plus, red, and red minus. So what gets you on this list? Well, number one, you have to use a sales agent. Number two, you probably have upfront back-end sales charges. There are surrender fees. There's cross-selling. That means they're selling you other types of financial products. And they often have the worst of the worst product, and that is the equity indexed annuity. So this is the bad list. Unfortunately, the majority of the companies on your vendor lists are red rated. That might make you mad. I don't know if this makes you feel any better. This is the story across the country, and it is what we are trying to change. So it's not just all those things I told you, having to use a salesperson, front end, back end loads, selling equity indexed annuities. No, it's conflicts of interest. Take a look at this. I'm not going to read it all, but if you work for Equitable Advisors and you're one of their sales agents, you must meet certain minimum sales requirements in equity products to qualify for health and retirement benefits. So in order for them to get these benefits, they have to sell their products, a certain level of them. Could you imagine if your paycheck or your healthcare or your retirement was contingent on how many A's you gave out? I bet you'd be giving out a lot of A's. We think this is a big problem. These agents are also trying to qualify for trips. These are trips paid for by educators. You might have heard about this. The SEC charged VALIC financial advisors for failing to disclose payments to promote services in your state. Equitable Financial paid $50 million for failure to disclose certain fees. Again, I wonder why any school district in the country would allow these companies after these fines. So that will land you on the red list. Yellow, these are not terrible. They actually have some decent products, decent fee structures. The big thing is there are no upfront loads or sales commissions or surrender charges. The fees are pretty reasonable. And you have two companies in this category. Green. We think this is what you want to look at. No upfront or back-end commissions or surrender charges, low fees, quality investments, transparency, no cross-selling. This is a really good list, and you don't have any companies on this list, but the even better list is the Green Plus. And there are two companies on this list, Fidelity Investments and Vanguard, and you have one available to you. All right. So what vendors did Frank and Ashley choose? Well, Frank faced three problems. Number one, he didn't attend a non-sales agent talk like this. Number two, he met this guy in the lounge. Number three, Frank was hungry, and this guy had sandwiches. Frank was sold a target date 2065 fund from a red rated vendor. And this fund charged 2.3% in fees. And if you're unfamiliar with the term target date fund, just a quick little explanation here. We think this is a very simple way to allocate investments in a way that assures that your stocks to fixed investments are allocated in a way that lines up with your age. The idea being that the farther you are from retirement, the more aggressive you can be, the more stocks you can have in your portfolio. The closer you get to retirement, someone like me, not that I'm close to retirement, but I'm getting up there in age, I have much less of my money in stocks. More of my assets are allocated towards fixed investments. What's great about the target date fund is you just pick one mutual fund aimed at a date in the future. You think that you'll retire. In every year, it automatically becomes a little less risky. So this is what Frank had. Let's look at Ashley. Now, she attended a non-sales agent talk like this. And because she had this knowledge, she chose a target date 2065 fund from a green rated firm in your district. I wonder who that company could be. And she only paid 0.12%. As Scott likes to say, 2.3% doesn't seem like a lot, right? Wouldn't we love to get back to inflation of 2.3%, which I actually think we are getting back to. But this is 19 times more expensive, Frank's investment than Ashley's. As you can see, it's a difference of over $300,000 at retirement. If you have a cell phone, you might want to take a picture of this. I will share this with Aaron, this presentation. I know he's recording it, but this is one of our favorite posts of the years, and it's by an Instagram account called the Personal Finance Club. And we just think it so simply illustrates the impact of high fees. So if you look at the top, running across from left to right, you see fee structure of 0.05%, 0.2%, 1%, and 2%. Now keep in mind, Frank was paying more than 2%. Going down from the left, you have 10 years, 25 years, and 50 years. So let's say you invest in a product charging, let's say 0.2%, which is more than the green rated vendor in your district. After 25 years, you will have lost about 5% to fees. Go all the way over to the right, and this is Frank's fate. And actually, it would be even worse. He would have lost 40% to fees. And if you invest for 50 years and you're paying 2%, you lose more than 64% to fees. So folks, fees matter. Real quick, little data on our rating system. There are close to 14,000 school districts in the country. We have data on close to 5,000 of them. We have just about all the large school districts. We estimate that we have data covering close to 1.7 million teachers, and this would cover more than 55% of all public K-12 teachers. We are beginning to map this data. We'll be making this available to the public, but you can get a sense of how districts are doing around the country. Wisconsin is particularly good with their 403B. You might be able to see that with Florida, we have data for all of your school districts, just like we do for California. And unfortunately, there's a lot of reddish color there, just like in California. Okay, so here's how we grade. So we've gone ahead and rated the vendors. We then assigned school districts a grade. The best you can do is single vendor. This means a district puts their plan out to bid, just like 401k providers, and says, financial service industry, give us your best combination of fees and service, and we will pick the best vendor for our most valuable resource, our employees. So that's how you get an A. Now, if you put it out to bid, but you have three vendors, we'll give you a B. To earn a C, you have to have at least one green vendor available. Now, it's great that there's a green vendor available in a lot of school districts. The problem is there's so many other bad vendors, and the bad vendors are the ones sending the sales agents out. So you get a C if you have at least one green vendor, you get a D if you have at least one yellow vendor, and then you get a F if you only have red vendors. Here is our data so far. Only 146 school districts that we have rated have received an A. Only 22, even less, have received a B. The big number for our data is more than 60%, close to 3,000 school districts. Again, we're very happy that all these teachers in these districts have access to at least one green rated vendor, but our question is, do they even know which vendor to choose? And it's doubtful. As I've said, Aaron Standish does not work in more than one district, unfortunately. And you can see close to 34 districts receive a D or an F. How about your district? Well, you probably know by now you got a C. And what we do, though, is when you search and we have data on your district, we assign green checks to all the green vendors. And the way you would search your district is you would go to our homepage, you would choose your state, drop-down menu, you would then pull down and you would choose your district. Real quickly on your 457B choices, you have one quality green rated company, and that's Fidelity. If you're watching this presentation and you have been sold a high fee red rated vendor, first of all, do not blame yourself. Now, if you were to sign up with one tomorrow, what could we do? We probably wouldn't have a lot of sympathy, but you probably didn't know about the impact of fees. You probably thought the sales agent had your best interest in mind, and unfortunately, that is not the case. So if you're stuck in a bad 403B, what do they say? If you're in a hole, stop digging, stop contributing, open a new account with a new vendor, direct all contributions to the new vendor. And then I would say probably not until the summer when you can actually breathe, investigate transferring dollars from the old vendor to the new vendor. The big problem is going to be that these red rated vendors impose surrender charges. So there's a chance you may be fined, taxed, punished for wanting to move your money. And this is one of the things that makes us particularly angry. If this is your situation, you got a couple options. The money usually becomes eligible to be transferred free of charge after 5 to 7 years. So you can wait and then transfer the money when it's no longer subject to penalty. We know some people that are so mad they just want to rip the Band-Aid off and they just want to go ahead and transfer the money. That is a decision, unfortunately, you'll have to make. Now, we've got resources that can help you. I'm going to post some of them in the chat when I'm done. I'm also going to mention our very robust 403B Wise Facebook group. We now have over 15,000 members. The number one post is, how do I get out of fill in the blank of the company? So you will find lots of resources, lots of community members who have experience being sold these products, but even more important, experience getting out of these products and leaving these companies. If you're looking to use an advisor, and we have there's nothing wrong with using a financial advisor, but we want you to use a fiduciary one. This is a person that must pledge to put your interests first. And again, I will post a resource about finding the right kind of advisor. Here's where you can get some transfer help, the aforementioned 403B Wise Facebook group. I'm going to post some resources. One's called Get Out of a Bad 403B, and then I'm going to post our year after year, single most read story, how to get out of AXA Equitable. If you are as motivated as Aaron and I are to inform colleagues, highly encourage you to listen to a podcast that we had produced called Learn by Being Burned. In 5 short episodes, you can learn from teachers from all over the country who were burned, then learned, and then drove change. Here is our webpage, and you can contact me right through here. And I'm going to go ahead and post these links, and then I would be happy to take your questions, but I am going to give you a warning. Scott Downhauer, my able-bodied partner, is not here, and he is the one who usually answers all of these questions. But with that, I will turn it over to questions.
Yeah, and I would just tell you, at least for me, I tried to click on the presentation and it did not work.
Did not work. Okay, I will work on that during Jill's to make sure.
Yeah, if anybody has a question, you can either raise your hand to ask Dan. You can unmute yourself. We don't have a lot of people here. You can put something in the chat if you don't want to speak on the microphone. That's fine. As you're thinking up of any questions, I will just add a few extra bits of information. If you have a 403B and certainly the sessions today are just very introductory, right? We're not taking deep dives into this. The hope is that this will at least spur your interest. Maybe you'll attend our next session where we take a little bit deeper of a dive, or maybe you'll start to look into this a little bit more yourself. And if this is something you determine that, oh, wow, I was sold a high cost 403B. This is not an investment product that is good for me. It's riddled with fees. It's not earning much. And you want to, like Dan said, transfer. First of all, make sure when you talk to the vendors, you refer to it as a contract exchange. That is officially what it's referred to as. I did post a document. We created this several years ago that was like a generic. The problem is each vendor does it differently. I will just warn you. There's no like generic way I can tell you on how to do this contract exchange. All I can tell you is you're going to have to contact the company you want to move funds from to talk to and ask them what paperwork they need from you. You're going to need to contact the company you want to move funds to ask what the paperwork is that they require to move the funds to. And then once you get those, not to introduce more complexity to this, but then there's also what's called a third-party administrator. That's in essence the person the district hires to maintain our 403B accounts, to make sure they're following IRS regulations. Our district doesn't have the capacity to do that. Every district hires a third-party administrator. Ours is called TSA Consulting Group /Omni. You will also need to contact them to let them know. Now they make it easy. Once you're done with the other two sides, they have an online distribution center. I think that's what they call it, where you just upload all the information there. But I don't get discouraged. I see that constantly. People come to me and are like, I know I have to change this. I know I need to do a contract exchange, but I started to do it and then I stopped. I got frustrated. I didn't know where to turn next. You do have to be persistent. And a lot of it's time sensitive. So once you start it, you have to complete it in 30, 60, 90 days. You're going to have to talk to them. If you're somebody who's just looking to start a 403B for the first time, I will tell you can do it on your own. You don't need somebody to do it for you. That's what the salespeople make it seem like. They're like, oh, hey, we can sign you up for your 403B. Yes, they can, but it's not. You don't need them to sign up for a 403B. If you go into PeopleSoft into your benefits page and go under voluntary retirement plans, it lists there all of our vendors, and then all you need to enroll with a vendor is the plan number. They have a certain number that you have to enter in when signing up that links you to the school district. That's all you need. But guess what? Only one vendor gives you the plan number on the main page. And which vendor do you think that is? Right? It's the green plus one. It's Fidelity. So really, Fidelity is the only one you can sign up for on your own. But you can do that 100% on your own. Yeah, Robert, go ahead. Unmute yourself. Ask a question.
Yeah, so my question is, can you make lump sum contributions, or do they have to be regular paycheck or payroll deductions?
Only payroll deductions. Yeah, the 403B is only funded through payroll deductions. So if you start now and you're like, oh, I've got $10,000 laying around, I want to put in, you can't. What you could do is you could deposit $10,000 into your account and then put your whole entire next couple paychecks into it. But it's only payroll deduction that's it's funded with. And that also goes to the next point, is that you do have to fill out what's called a salary reduction agreement, an SRA form, to start your deductions. That can also be done online through PeopleSoft. All right. They make it seem, again, the sales will make it seem like you need them, like they're doing you some huge favor by filling out your SRA for you, your salary reduction agreement. You can do it through PeopleSoft on your own. You literally, and you can change it if you want to. Like if you're doing $50 right now and you want to do $100, you don't need to get on the phone to call somebody. You go into PeopleSoft and you pick your vendor, and then you say it'll have how much you're putting in. You just change it from 50 to 100. That's it. It's literally that simple. So, a lot of these tasks you can do on your own. You don't necessarily need somebody. Now, there may be some other things you may need somebody for that you don't feel comfortable with that. But a lot of these basic tasks, you don't. You can do on your own. Any other questions? Anyone wants to raise their hand?
I do have a question. I don't know what I've missed so far. To everyone, I'm Michael Hampton. Sorry, I'm late. I am already in a 403B. My question is, there is some requirement because of my age about withdrawing a certain amount of money or having to withdraw at a particular time every year, quote unquote, for the government taxes. Can you explain that to me?
So those are your RMDs, your required minimum distributions. I wish Scott were here, but Dan, you may know a little bit more about them.
Okay.
I'm going to search for a resource that I have on this. I think it's about 4%. I think you have to take out every year, but I am definitely no expert on this. Let me look for this resource on our page. What is your question specifically, Michael, about your RMDs?
No, I just wanted, because I've taken out, I have a one before tax and one after tax because of when I started it. Now, the before tax, I was told that I needed to do that withdrawal. I wasn't aware of it until I'm not sure it was a letter I got. I think it's a letter from the vendor.
Yeah, I'm posting this in our discussion board. And then, Michael, are you on the Facebook group? Are you on Facebook?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to post the 403BY's Facebook group. If you're not a member, I'm going to post that in the link. And looks like it did not post. Let me copy this. This is a perfect question for that group.
Yes, there is a Facebook group, 403BYs, correct?
Yeah, go ahead and join. There'll be 3 questions to ask. 1, do you sell products? Are you a teacher? How'd you hear about us? And we'll approve you. And then these would be good questions to ask, because we have plenty of retirees. We have plenty of people who are taking RMDs now.
Okay, so 403.
I wish I could.
It's not a whole
give
lot
you
of
a
money.
better
But
answer.
403BY.
Yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, because this is actually an important fact that I'm glad you brought up.
Absolutely.
You know, if you have a tax advantage retirement account, so if you have a 403B, if you have an IRA, there is a point, which is now I believe they changed. It's now age 72. I'm seeing it in front right there, at which the
Yeah.
government requires you to begin taking distributions.
Yeah.
Why? So they can get their tax money, presumably,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I just turned 73 in December, so they're telling me I got to do it.
Yeah. So there you go.
The good news is it's gradually moving up to age 75, but that
Okay.
doesn't help you, Michael.
No.
And then Dan, I see a question in the chat, and I'll read it if you can't
Yeah,
see
go
it.
ahead.
It says, "Is the same true for AXA Equitable for non-teachers? My husband is not in education, but has an account with Equitable through his employer." I imagine the first question would be, what type of account? I don't know if we're talking just a straight insurance product, if you're talking a separate 403B, maybe he works in another sort of nonprofit or
40, I think they also have 401k products. See, here's the big difference between the K-12 403B and the 401k. The 401k is subject to federal fiduciary rules. There was something called the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. And so a plan sponsor, and that means an employer who is offering a 401k, has a fiduciary duty to act in their employee's best interest. No such requirement exists in the K-12 403B, unfortunately, and it's maddening, especially considering that the 403B started in 1958 and the 401k didn't start till 20 years later, 1978, and they made it subject to ERISA, but not the K-12 403B. If you work at a private school or a private university, those 403B plans are subject to ERISA. It is maddening, the carve-outs. My partner likes to say, doesn't like it, but he does say this, K-12 educators are the only non-protected class. If you have a 457B, firefighter, police officer, you've got more protections.
Yeah, and I'm going to highlight something Dan said. That's a great point. A lot of the products, this is the reason why a lot of the products offered within 403B plans are considered substandard by most financial professionals, is because of what Dan just said. And, so I want to highlight, this is not a problem unique to the school district of Palm Beach County. This is a nationwide problem with 403B plans. And it all stems from the fact, what Dan said, they are non-ERISA, which means they do not, the plan sponsor, which is the school district, does not have a fiduciary duty to do what's best for its employers. That sounds crazy, I know.
As a former, as a retired attorney, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Now you see why I get so angry about this and do these sessions. It makes me very angry.
So they can dip into the funds. They could do whatever bad investments or undercover investments. They can, do.
They do not have a fiduciary duty.
I'm saying so. Well, that's nice to know. Maybe it's time for me to take it up.
Well, Michael, the thing that infuriates me too is there's no rule saying a school district doesn't have to act in the employee's best interest. Do you know what I mean? But I also understand school districts have so much on their plate. I've worked in, public education for more than a decade. So I am sympathetic to all the demands, and a lot of them will tell you, oh, this is a supplemental plan. We're focused on maintaining the pension. But as not all states maintain their pension to the same level. But I know there's a teacher shortage. Wouldn't you want to use your 403B as a recruiting tool?
Exactly.
Yeah, and so back to the original question, Heather, is it depends. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, we don't, unless it's a 403B.
Yeah.
If he's a teacher in a school district that has a 403B, it's probably a really poor product, and it's probably a red rated product. But there is some nuance to this, right? I mean, so it all depends on the account that he has it in. It depends on the product that he has. It depends on a lot of factors. Yeah, because Dan may have said it earlier. I mean, some of these vendors that you see show up as red rated, they might be green rated in another district even. Because when, like Dan said, when they have to bid and they have to compete, it's amazing all of a sudden the good product that they can offer. It's shocking.
Yeah, Exhibit A is City of Chicago. Corebridge is the financial company Corebridge is one of our red rated vendors, but they competed in Chicago. They were named the single vendor and they drastically dropped prices. So yeah, I'm really glad you pointed that out, Aaron.
Yeah, and so I can give you some bad news and some good news about the school district of Palm Beach County. The bad news is you already saw it. We have a lot of red rated vendors. And even worse news is, I've seen the statistics. A lot of our teachers have their money with the red rated vendors. Why? Because they're the ones who have salespeople out earning commissions out in the schools. That's why. The good news is, go ahead.
You want to expose some of those red rated vendors?
Oh, we showed them earlier. I think probably before you got on. You can go back in the slide deck. We'll send it to you. You can look at them.
Okay. To see if I need to move out of there.
So here, I'll show you real quick, Michael, from our homepage. You would click this and it shows our grade. This is how we rate the vendors here. Okay. And then what we do is on our homepage at the top, you would search Florida and then you would search Palm Beach.
Okay.
And this is how we expose it. And then you click that. Now we don't make the ones red, but we do put a click or a check with the green one. And then we say, learn about our rating system. And then you come to it and you can see all these terrible companies here. Each time you look at the info, you'll get more details on the problems with them. And then the good ones
one of
over
the big
here.
Problems, and this is what we're going to get into.
Wow.
And what we're going to get into with the next presentation when we turn it over to Joe and Lisa. One of the big problems in these red rated vendors is simply the investment product they make available. Jill's going to go a little bit, I think, over, although we'll go more in the next session, over sort of what some of these annuity products are that they offer. Because all you can put in a 403B is a mutual fund or an annuity. That's it. Those are your only two options. And a vast, vast majority of people have annuities. When I talk to people, they don't even know what an annuity is. Very few people can explain to me how an annuity works. And they especially don't know the type of annuity they have. Because annuities in and of themselves aren't bad things. It's just the way they're structured in 403Bs are often really poorly structured, and they're really expensive and really costly. So that's what makes them a lot of them red vendors. What I was saying before, I gave you the bad news. The good news that I can tell you in our school district is our district is looking into this currently. It's not an easy fix. It's not an easy fix. I was one who was screaming from the mountaintops that, hey, just change it. What are you doing? Just come on. What are you waiting for? I've since had a lot of meetings with our risk and benefits management department, and they're open to listening. They're open to doing things, but it's difficult. We have 20,000 plus employees in our district or so. These insurance companies that dominate, they have big lobby, right? They lobby for there to be no changes to happen. They have a lot of influence, statewide and district wide. But I can tell you what our district has just done that is probably, hopefully, going to end up in a positive change is they didn't do a bid. They didn't do an RFP. That would be bidding it out, a request for proposal. But what they did was an RFI. They did a request for information. Because the other problem is a lot of these vendors are very opaque with what they offer. They don't really tell you. The only way to find out is you have to sign up and pray that it was something good they put you in. So we did an RFI in which we asked for them to disclose all of the products that they currently offer, and if they want to make any changes moving forward. In the RFI, we said this is exactly what we're looking for in our district, and this is exactly what we expect you to offer if you want to remain a vendor in our district. So the hope is that through that RFI process, we've just recently gotten all of them back. I'm sort of on a committee that helps kind of look at them. I'm certainly not the decision maker. But the hope is that, the committee will look at those and decide that, hey, some of these are really poor products that we should not be offering to our teachers, and that hopefully they'll at least cut out some of those red vendors from signing up new accounts. That's the hope.
And please tell your colleagues, if you are the only one from your school site that attended this, let them know, have them get in touch with Aaron, get this presentation, join the Facebook group, look at Jill's materials. You, again, are very lucky to be in the district you're in. So many other of your colleagues around the country, there is no one educating them except the sales agents.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that, Dan, because what else I can tell you is that if you are moved by this presentation and the next presentation, get us to your school. Dan has done several full staff presentations. And I don't mean at an after school meeting where that's where the vendors go and they get 30 minutes to talk. I'm talking about a PD day. I'm talking about a preschool day where we can be there for 3 hours, do 3 or 4 different sessions to really make a difference. We've gone to probably 5 schools and done that, but it's not easy. It's not easy to get, stuff that's not going to move school grades into PD days and things. But if you can push to your administration for it, you might be able to do that.
I think I'm a union rep on campus, and that is
Good.
one of the things that we have spoken about. Maybe we'll bring it up at one of the EBC meetings. See what happens.
Absolutely. Just keep pushing for it. Tell them to reach out to me. I'll reach out to Dan. I'll reach out to Jill. We'll either dial into your place. We'll come to your place. We're more than willing to come and give strictly education. We won't have sandwiches. We won't have, sorry, but we will have education. I promise you.
We'll have pictures of sandwiches.
That's right. Pictures of sandwiches. As good as we can do.
Sometimes I bring goldfish.
Oh, look at that.
That's good, Jill.
The SEC's got those deep pockets of goldfish. Oh, she does it personally. Yeah, sorry. Jill's got those deep pockets. All right. So with that being said, we're at 5:05. So we're going to transition over. A big, huge thank you to Dan. Can't thank him enough. I know he's traveling right now. So for him to join us while traveling, we appreciate it. Oops, you're muted, Dan.
Sorry. Happy to do it. I will be traveling to the airport. I have to cut out pretty soon, but thank you again for all your time, everyone. I know it's a long day for you.
And Dan will be back on the 15th of April too, if you want to come to that with a little more focus on investing. So with that being said, we are going to transition it over to Jill Persson, and she's also with Lisa Roberts. Jill is from the San Francisco office of the SEC, of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Lisa is from the Miami office of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. So we got both coasts covered here at the SEC. We're very happy. So with that being said, I will bring up your presentation, but I will turn it over to either Lisa or Jill, whoever's going to lead it off. Thank you.
Lisa's going to get us started.
Yep. As soon as the PowerPoint comes up. Next slide, please. We have to give a disclaimer. Jill and I are both attorneys with the SEC, and we disclaim responsibility for any private publication or statement of any SEC employer or commissioner. This presentation expresses the author's views and does not necessarily reflect those of the commission, the commissioners, or other members of the staff. You may ask us our opinion on something, and it's just our opinion, but we must give this disclaimer. Next slide. So some things that we're going to cover are an overlap, but like Aaron said, we are taking a broad look here and getting you interested in this topic so that you continue to attend these courses, join Dan's Facebook group, ask questions. What we're going to talk about today is just generally an overview of the SEC, saving for retirement, and 403B and 457B plan basics. Jill is one of our experts at the SEC on that topic. Next slide. So we're also going to cover investment choices and fees. And you saw with what Dan showed you how important it is to be aware of the fees. And a lot of people aren't even aware. They don't pay attention to the fees. They might look at their statements. They might not. But when they see a small, oh, it's only 0.25. But when you look at that for 20, 25 years, it makes a difference. Like the two teachers that Dan talked about, the difference in what they had when they were ready to retire, the significant difference was fees that were paid. We're going to talk about preventing fraud. Before you invest, we want you to ask a lot of questions and check people out. We've got resources at the SEC. Like Aaron mentioned, you know, a lot of people can't explain an annuity. If you can't explain a product, you have no business being an investor in that product. And in the SEC website that we'll talk about, investor.gov, there are products and explanations of all the products, all the choices you have. And we want you to make informed investment decisions before you make decisions. There's no rush to any of this. It's never too early to start, and it's never too late to start. The point is, you got to do it. You got to think of that three-legged stool, and you're responsible for your planning for your retirement. And that's all there is to it. So you've got to take your time so that you can make informed investment decisions. And then we'll talk about the resources that we have at the SEC. And Dan shared his resources, which seemed great. Next slide. So the SEC's mission is threefold. It's to protect investors. It's to maintain fair, orderly, and efficient markets and to facilitate capital formation. And one of the ways that we protect investors is by providing these types of financial literacy education events. I always remind Aaron that we give presentations to school kids. In fact, April is Financial Literacy Month, and I've teamed up with some people in the Miami-Dade district, and they send me a list of all the teachers who want presentations. And it's funny how I give these presentations and then I'll go back to the school the following year and it's the teachers who paid the most attention, but it makes me happy because if at least I get the message to somebody, that's good. Like Aaron showed the different resources that you have for younger students, older students. Like tomorrow I'm presenting to 8th graders. And that seems like, wow, that's young, but the SEC has a presentation that's called Financial Jeopardy. So we try to make it fun and start planting seeds in kids' heads because you're not born being financially literate. You have to learn it. And like I said, it's never too late. So I have a lot of presentations lined up in Miami-Dade County for the month of April. And Aaron, we are available since we are in Miami. I have got a lot of colleagues who live in the Palm Beach, Broward area that they don't volunteer for Miami-Dade presentations, but would love opportunities in your area. And it's so important. If we reach 1, 2, 3 kids, that's great. I love it when the kids themselves have Roth IRAs and then they take over. And just like Dan is offering this Facebook group, it's a good place to talk. The classroom is a good place to talk. So that is what we do by protecting investors, is to provide this information. And now we'll go on to the next slide.
Okay.
I'll turn it over to Jill.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa. Just a couple things. I wanted to give you guys, what we're going to cover here today is a little bit of the same stuff you heard from Dan and Aaron. But I also wanted to just plant something in your heads. When you are going to decide, when you decide to invest in your 403B or your 457B, which we'll talk about more about what those types of plans are. I always use this example. When you go out to buy a car or a refrigerator, you do a ton of research. Or at least I do. and you look on websites, you compare products, you compare places to buy your refrigerator. If you're, you look at Home Depot, Lowe's, your local appliance store, same with cars. And that is a fraction of what you're going to be investing in a defined contribution plan. So just think about if you just did a little bit of effort doing research and checking and making sure that this is whatever you're investing in is the right fit for you, it'll go a long way, and you will be more an Ashley and less of a Frank. So, so as we get started here, just a high level about what defined benefits are. A defined benefit plan versus a defined contribution plan. I go out to school districts and to union groups after school. We have presentations we give to teachers. And a lot of times people are confused about the difference between a defined benefit plan and a defined contribution plan. And the highlight for a pension plan, that's your FERS. That's offered by the state of Florida. It's not optional. Usually contributions are made by you, your employer, and the state. It's based on a defined formula. You don't really have any input on what kind of investments are put into those into FERS. And you're provided with a specific monthly benefit at retirement based on a whole bunch of factors in that formula. And your employer or FERS bears the investment risks. A defined contribution plan, or sometimes called a voluntary supplemental retirement plan, that's a 403B plan or 457B plan. These are supplemental to your retirement. So key differences are they're optional for you to participate in, and we're all giving you the hard sell here to invest in them so that you can bridge that gap, that income gap at retirement. But they are optional. But that's great because that means that you have control, because you get to choose the plan if you want to do a 403B, a 457B, Roth, or traditional. You get to choose from that very long list of what investment company you want to go with and what type of mutual fund or annuity you want to invest in. But then you also bear all of the investment risks. So although it's optional and you get to control it, there is some risk. And this is why you need to ask questions and check information that you receive from the company or the provider, or if you're going with a salesperson, that person. We hope you do your own research. Again, the amount of available at retirement depends on how much you contributed when you started, how long the funds were invested, how well they perform, and account expenses. We're going to do a deep dive into account expenses that are going to complement what Dan provided a few minutes ago. And as Dan pointed out, there's some age and circumstance restrictions on withdrawals, and we'll go into that just a little bit. Next slide, please. Okay, what are they? So a 403B and a 457B, these are plans that were created by through IRS code. They're similar to a 401k. The 403B is not covered under what Dan explained was ERISA. So these don't have the fiduciary protection that equivalent 401k would have in the private sector. They're both come in a traditional and a Roth option, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the next couple slides. And both plans allow for you can use an annuity contract, or you do a custodial account, which is a mutual fund. And as Aaron said earlier, you can only invest in mutual funds and annuities. And as we'll point out later, mutual funds are regulated by the SEC. And there's different types of annuities. Only one is regulated by the SEC, and the rest are regulated by state insurance corporation regulators. So if you have any regulatory issues, which we'll talk about in future slides, you'd have to go to your state regulator. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so it's 403B and a 457B, they're offered by your employer. And you can contact your employer for more information. Your human resources tech at palmbeachschools.org is Maureen Toolin. Aaron mentioned TSA Consulting Group. You can also go to their webpage and do something similar that Dan showed you. You can go to your state and then pull down your school district, and it will show you a list of all the different types of plans available and the different vendors that you can choose from. And in Palm Beach County, you have, for the traditional 403B, you have 15 investment options. And in a traditional 457B, you have 14 when I say investment options, I mean vendors, because within those vendors, you have additional options. And then you also have an option for a Roth 403B, and that has 15 investment providers. And then there's a simplified enrollment 403B. And I want to just say that we use this slide deck, every year we do little amendments to it and that sort of thing. So in these talking points, I was looking over what I had put last year, and there's definitely been changes in the investment providers. So I'm not sure, Aaron, maybe you can answer this question, but I think every year the investment providers can change, your population can change. So last year, in your traditional 403Bs, you had 16 investment providers. This year, you have 15. So somebody, you could have lost a couple, you could have gained a couple more. So whoever is doing the negotiating for those, those can change. So it's a good idea, even if you're already in a 403B or a 457B, it's a good idea to keep an eye on those lists, so that if you want to make changes or divert future funds to different investment providers, you can do that. And once again, I would say you can use the TSA Consulting Group, which was the third-party administrator that administrates your 403Bs and 457s. You can go to that website and you can actually pull down your salary reduction agreement, which I'll explain in a future slide. And then you can also, Maureen's contact information is on there, and you can also see on that page the various investment providers that are available for each option I just described. Next slide. Okay, so who can contribute? It's anybody that works at a public school that's involved in the day-to-day operations. So these should be available to certificated and classified staff. And you can pick your plan. You can invest in both the 403B and the 457. You can invest in a traditional and a Roth. You can opt in. Like I said, it's not automatic like your pension or your Social Security. You pick the investment from that list of available options we talked about just a minute ago with TSA Consulting Group. And you can pick how much you want to put in each month from your salary reduction agreement. And you can also modify that in the future if you want to, like some people, what they will do, which I think is a great idea if you're first starting out. You do what you can. Of course, if you've got you're paying your bills and you've got loans to pay off, you maybe only want to do a little bit, but maybe every year when you get a COLA raise or a merit raise or whatever kind of raise you get, you might want to take a little portion of that and divert that to your supplemental, your 403B or your 457, and that makes your contribution grow, and then your eventual pile of money at the end, that will make it grow as well. And then once again, you can look for something called a meaningful notice plan summary information on the TSA Consulting Group page. And I just wanted to we talked a little bit about the three-legged stool. I look at it as almost a four-legged chair. So you've got your pension, your defined benefit plan, you have Social Security in Florida, which is great. A lot of states don't offer that to teachers. And you have your voluntary supplemental defined contribution plan, which we just talked about. And then you also have your personal savings. And this is where you get you could do your IRA. Maybe you have real estate or other types of investments that are security related. So there are ways to save, and we hope that you will utilize those ways. Next slide, please. Okay, here's a quick overview of the plan. As Dan mentioned, Contribution limits. This is this is old data in our slide. Contribution limits in 2024 are up to $23,000 a year. If you're over 50, you can contribute an additional $7,500 a year. And then there's another catch-up provision for more than 15 years of service, and you can contribute additional monies under certain circumstances. So I would check with your HR liaison or read up on your meaningful notice plan to see what that says. Another thing is, this is something that Dan said about contributing up to the cap. So if you are contributing in both plans, and this is a little unrealistic because unless you have other means of salary, but you can contribute up to $61,000 if you are in both a 403B and a 457B. You can contribute to each cap, which is really nice because that gives you a lot of flexibility with how much you can save. And then briefly on distributions, typically it's at 59.5, or when you're separated from service, there's an additional ways you can receive distributions for a 403B, but you do receive a penalty, as Dan said, for early withdrawal. You're going to be taxed with your regular income tax rate, and then there's an additional 10% penalty on the distribution unless you're rolling it over. And this could mean a substantial loss in savings. There are exceptions to this, so you may want to check some of your plan materials to see what those are. And they usually go into quite a bit of detail about other things like loans and distributions that are made to, or what they call early withdrawals. So make sure you understand what those are for your particular situation. Let's see, next slide, please. Okay, and here I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between a traditional and Roth. It's when you read up on this, it seems very confusing, but we've kind of drilled it down into these salient points here. So a traditional Roth, you're contributing in your salary reduction agreement before taxes. So it lowers your taxable income now, and you'll be taxed at withdrawal. For a Roth plan, you're taxed after the contribution. There's no change to your taxable income now, and you're not taxed at withdrawal. So to recap, with a traditional option, you get a tax break now and a tax hit later. And with a Roth option, you get a tax hit now and a tax break later. And next slide, please.
Would your tax bracket make a determination as to which one to invest in?
Say one more time.
At an older age, you're earning less, your taxes would be less.
Right, and that's where you really need to talk to a tax professional about what you expect your tax basis to be at retirement when you're making these decisions. A lot of people will hedge that and do both. They'll invest part of it in a Roth and part of it in a traditional. So it just depends on your personal situation. I know several people that do both, and I know people that are, I'm going to get the tax break now, and I know people that want to just do Roth all the way and they won't do anything else. So it just really depends on your personal preference and a consultation with your tax professional. And I know Dan said this before. He says, I am not a tax expert, and Jill is not a tax expert either. So, and so here we have this slide why people don't invest in a 403B plan. And a lot of times people say, especially, well, I've got this great pension, I don't really need it. Some people think, especially new teachers, I can't afford it right now. Other people, think, oh, I don't know enough about it, and I'm nervous about it. So on the reason one, I already have a pension. Aaron and Dan both mentioned this. Pension does not get you to 100% of your replacement income at retirement. I don't remember what the number is for Aaron, but I know for Florida, but I know in California, your pension will get you to 55% of your replacement income at retirement. So you have to bridge the gap on the rest if you want to have the same income you have at retirement that you do in retirement. I can't afford it right now. Sure, if you're just out of school, you got student loans, other things that, other expenses that come up, kids going to college, all that kind of stuff. But the earlier you start, we'll talk about this in a coming up slide, the earlier you start, you're going to benefit from compounding interest. You start small in the beginning, and then you add to it as time goes on, and it will really grow. And then for the third reason, you don't know enough about it, by attending this seminar, you are getting rid of that reason. So thank you for attending. And you can research more at, like I said, at tsag.com/bwise.org, or speak with your human resources tech, or talk to Aaron. Next slide, saving for retirement.
Real quick, Susan had her hand raised for a moment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Susan, no problem. Susan, did you still want to ask a question?
Well, I apologize if this is a repeat because I was late. But the previous slide, Jill, I'm a little bit shocked, and I'm ashamed to say I'm 55 years old, or the one before that was comparing the Roth. I did not realize, and maybe, yeah, that one. There's before tax contribution. Can you tell me what that means? That means because, oh yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So what that means is, when you get paid, you get your gross pay from your employer, and they take out deductions. And what they'll do is, before they overlay the federal tax and state tax, and if you have city tax, they will take out that money and they will put it into your investment. And you choose whether you want to do it with the traditional or Roth. So that is why when you contribute before taxes, it will lower your taxable income every year at tax time, because it's a tax benefit that you get. But if you decide you don't really want that tax benefit now, and you'd rather have it later, you can contribute after you contribute to your federal and state taxes. And then when you withdraw the money later, you're not going to get taxed on that.
Okay, I see. I understand now. I was thinking something different. So I appreciate you, Jill. Thank you.
Oh, sure. No problem. Okay.
Yeah, and I get a lot of questions about that, Jill. We get asked that a lot when people are setting it up. So I know that it's a good question by Susan. It's sometimes hard to understand the difference between pre-tax income and after-tax, or pre-tax contribution and after-tax.
Exactly. Yeah, and I was going to say, the 403B, when I think Dan or Aaron mentioned that it was created in 1958, or at some point in the mid-50s it was created. It was originally created for teachers as a pre-taxed investment vehicle, so that you wouldn't be taxed, so that it was something that could, typically teachers have not always been paid the most. I hope that's not a controversial topic, and this was developed because of that lower salary situation. They wanted teachers to be able to have a way to save for retirement. So they created the 403B. It's there's lots of information out there on the internet about the history of the 403B, but it was a tax advantaged investment vehicle. Specifically, later on, of course, the Roth came into play, and there are a lot of people, like I said earlier, a lot of people like to contribute after tax, so they're not taxed at withdrawal, because their tax basis is lower when they're retired, because maybe they didn't replace all their income at retirement, so they don't want to take a bigger tax hit when they're retired. So it's in some ways, if you want to hedge and you want to do both, that might be a way to handle it. But really, it's important to talk to a tax professional. So hope that helped.
And the only other thing I want to highlight just one more thing on that, because again, it's a question I get a lot. and I don't see it on this slide, because some people say, well, why don't I just invest in a brokerage account, right? Why don't I just, or put it in a savings account? And one of the big benefits of both a traditional and a Roth is the growth in the account is tax-free, right? So if you just have it in a regular old brokerage account where you're like buying and selling stocks on your own, right? You have to pay taxes on the growth every single year.
That's right.
So that's the keys, really. So either one of
Yes.
these accounts you're opening is tax-free growth either way. So
That is a really great point. And I am going to add that to my slide. So thank you, Aaron. Okay, so I think we were on slide 13, maybe? Yeah, okay. Okay, so if you're wondering, why should I invest in a 403B when I have a pension? We talked about the invest early for compound interest. We're going to have a slide. Next slide's going to show some of that. You need to supplement your retirement income. I think Aaron said in the chat, you're not going to get to 55% for retirement. What is it?
You would have to work like 35, 36 years.
Okay.
It's possible, but it's a lot more years. Our multiplier is 1.6% in Florida, which is a little bit lower than some other states.
Okay, so that makes this even more important to do. Okay. You're just, you're ensuring your long-term financial security by making sure that you have enough money to cover your expenses at retirement. The compound interest, you take advantage of time by investing early. And again, you're going to bridge that income gap between pension and financial needs at retirement. So those are the reasons. And again, you can contribute on a pre-tax basis, as we discussed, which was the original purpose of a 403B. And just a note, I don't know if I made this clear at all at the beginning, but both the 403B and the 457B were created through the IRS. They're part of the IRS tax code, like the 401k. So you can go on the IRS website and you can read up on the 403B and the 457B. I think there's a slide at the end that provides that location, but you can also Google it and learn more about it. Next slide. Okay, so here we have a diagram that shows, the earlier you start saving, the better chance you have of meeting your financial goals and how compound interest works. So as the interest you make on your investment, it's added to the principal amount you've put in, and it just kind of snowballs. So you begin to earn interest on that interest. So when I mentioned earlier that, you start out small, and then when you have more room in your budget, maybe at a time of a raise, or somehow your expenses get reduced some way, and you want to add to your contribution at your salary with your salary reduction agreement, it'll add up over time, as this slide demonstrates. So here you see at age 25, you investing $209 a month, you're going to get to $500,000 when you need it. If you're at age 55, and you're going to need to invest $3,100 to get to $500,000. So it's never too late to invest, but it's good to start early. So it's going to be really fruitful if you start younger, even if it's just a little bit. So, but I don't want to discourage people from starting late. I know a lot of people that it's surprising how fast this grows, even when you start a little bit later in your career. Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. So as discussed earlier, I think everybody's covered this. You have two choices when you invest, and this is through the IRS code. You can't invest in any other type of product. It's always going to be mutual funds and annuities until they change the code. But that's so for right now. And there are a lot of different types of mutual funds, and there's 3 different types of annuities, which we'll get to in the next few slides. So we'll go to slide 16. Thank you. A mutual fund, for those of you that don't know, it pulls money from investors and invests the money into stocks, bonds, debt, money markets, and other securities. Mutual funds have shares that can be purchased and redeemed. Each share represents an investor's part ownership in the fund and the income it generates. Mutual funds can be many different things. They can be stocks, bonds, other assets, and that compilation of those investments is called a portfolio. Each investor owns shares, and all of the mutual funds that you invest in are going to have costs that lower your investment return. So it's important, really important, to shop around and compare fees, and we'll talk about fees in a little bit. But just for an example, if you're investing in a mutual fund and it has a front end load, and we'll talk about the different types of fees in a minute, you can say, I want to invest $5,000 in this mutual fund. Let's say this is outside of your 403B or your 457B. I just want to invest $5,000 in a mutual fund. The amount invested is not going to be $5,000. It's going to be a number lesser than that, maybe $4,800. So it's really important for you to know every month, if you're putting in a certain amount of money and you're allocating it to certain investments, it's important to know that some of that money may go towards expenses or other fees. Just so you know. And I want to make a statement, just a quick add on here. It's sort of out of order, but it's something that Lisa mentioned. And that is, it's really important once you do decide to invest in anything, it doesn't matter if it's a 403B, a 457, 401k, your own personal stock brokerage or your own personal wealth manager or investment advisor, always check your statements and make sure that it looks right. People will get their envelopes in the mail or on the computer, in their email, and they will throw them in a pile and they won't look at them. It's super important to do that, to see if you're being charged appropriate fees, just for a whole bunch of different reasons, to see if your account is performing the way you want it to make sure that, if you need to make changes, adjustments, whatever, it's really important to read those. So if you are already invested in a 403B or 457B and you're getting quarterly or monthly statements, please review them and just make sure it's doing what you want it to do. Okay, that little public service announcement. I'll move on to slide 17. Okay, so we discussed this a little bit. Bond funds. So those are primarily bonds and other types of debt securities. There's so many different types of funds. Stock funds. There are funds that track indexes. There are funds that are sector specific, meaning that they'll be in healthcare. Money market funds is sort of a cash equivalent, and they have much lower performance than a bond or a stock, but they're the closest thing to a cash equivalent that we have in a money market. They're really mostly used for income at the end of, like, say, your retirement, after retirement. If you're just receiving distributions. Balance funds, those can include different types of stocks and bonds or money markets, and they're really designed to reduce your risk by diversifying the investment. But I want to just say there's a lot of mutual funds out there that are well diversified, and there's some that are, just like regular stocks or any other type of investment, they have more risk. So you want to really review something called the prospectus. We talked about the portfolio a little bit ago. The prospectus is something that describes what the mutual fund is. You can go to the FINRA expense analyzer. We'll talk about that at the end. But if you are investing in any kind of a mutual fund, that mutual fund should have a prospectus. This prospectus can be, 5 inches thick or 3 inches thick. You can review the summary prospectus to see what kind of fees you're going to pay, what kind of performance, how many dollars are invested, just all sorts of really critical information to help you make a better and informed decision about what you're purchasing. Target date funds, Dan covered. So just quickly, those are usually funds that they're designed for as a retirement investment. So if you are a new teacher and you're going to retire in, say, 2050 or 2055, that they will start out with investments that are less conservative and more leaning towards growth in the fund. And as you age, you get a curve that adjusts those, rebalances those allocations so that you will have more appropriate, less risky investments by the time you retire. So, for example, you might start out with early on, you might start out with more stocks and fewer bonds, fewer government securities. And as you grow older and you get closer to your retirement, those will rebalance and shift to be fewer stocks and more money markets and government securities to look more like income. Target dates are really designed as sort of an invest and forget. So if you choose wisely, I know in Dan's example, he had Frank and Ashley, and I think they both invested in target date funds, but one said substantially more at the end because of the fees. So then again, you want to look at all the fees and all this stuff from the summary prospectus. But if you're, these are typically offered by most plans, and I know that I do believe that Palm Beach County has some in their offerings from some of their vendors, and it is really something that you can just use as a retirement account, or true retirement account. So to summarize, basically what it means is over time the investment mix will gradually shift according to the fund strategy and the age of the recipient. Okay, we're moving on to slide 18, unless we have questions. Sorry. Okay, so what is an annuity? An annuity is an insurance product that can sometimes just be an insurance product, or it can be an insurance product and a security. And I think I mentioned earlier that there are three types. There's variable, fixed, and indexed. Variable is regulated by the SEC. Fixed and indexed are regulated by the state insurance corporation agencies in each state. For an annuity, you're making installment payments through your salary reduction agreement, and at the end, you're going to be receiving regular disbursements, or you can receive one lump sum for a rollover upon retirement or separation, or when you reach 59 and a half. In the case of a 403B and a 457B offered through your school district, you're going to be making those monthly contributions, and then in retirement, you'll start receiving distributions. Let's see if there's anything. There's an accumulation phase, which is when you're making contributions, and then the distribution phase. So that will be the lingo that they use when they're talking about those different phases. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, here we go. So a variable annuity. So typically a variable annuity is a bunch of mutual funds put together with an insurance wrapper and a lot of insurance features like death benefits, other insurance things that you might want to, what they call riders, and you pay for those riders. You pay for those insurance benefits, the death benefits, and they can be very expensive. They can also, since it works like a stock, like a regular security, your payout will vary depending on how much you put in, and the rate of return on your investments and the expenses associated with that investment. And the value of your contract will vary depending on all of those things and what you decide to put it in. We do have a bulletin it's from investor.gov, which I'll show you investor.gov in a few slides from now. It goes into a lot more detail about what a variable annuity is. I'm going to cover in the next slide. We can go to the next slide. I'm going to cover fixed annuity, very, very briefly, fixed annuities and indexed annuities. And I will just say this, indexed annuities in California make up the most invested in product offering that California has. And I know this is different from Florida. You guys have, 15 or 16. We have about, like Dan said, we have about 70 to choose from, and there's tens of thousands of different options, and it's crazy. It's way too much choice. And that's my opinion, not the opinion of the commission. But the fixed annuity and the indexed annuity are not securities. And every time they can create a new contract, every time they sell one to you, it can be a brand new contract. They can have surrender charges, which we'll talk about in a little bit. They can have surrender charges that reset every time you make a contribution. So you can be stuck in this surrender charge loop. So anytime you want to get out of it, you're going to have to pay a fee to get out of it. That could be a pretty decent percentage of what you've invested. So I would encourage you, before you invest in a fixed or an equity indexed annuity, to really research what you're investing in. It's not going to, there is a prospectus, there is usually some sort of a term sheet, but it's not going to be like the summary prospectus on a mutual fund that gives you all the data so that you can really research it. Just be super careful. Some of these are great options for some people, but you really want to know what you're getting into. So you really want to research, ask, and check. For example, indexed annuities can be written to have 15-year surrender periods so that you're locked in for a really long time and they're really hard to get out of. So, Aaron, do you have anything you want to add to that for those two?
Sorry.
Okay, we'll go on to investment fees.
Oh, sorry. No, you hit it. I mean, they are very commonly sold. Specifically the equity index annuities are what are very commonly sold. If you are on this call and you have a National Life Group contract, that's an equity index annuity. If you've bought it through Value Teachers, that's an equity index annuity.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, they may be suitable for some people, but you just got to really read and check and make sure. And unfortunately, these are the ones, we haven't really talked about the lunchroom yet, but we have a little bit touched on it, but these are the ones that are really pushed in the lunchroom. These are the ones that they come with a sandwich, pizza, bagel, whatever, even Broadway show tickets, and think about it. You're selling your retirement to go see a show or have a slice of pizza. It's just that there's no equity there in that kind of exchange. So you really want to make sure that you know what you're getting into. Okay. Investment fees. We talked about that a little bit. So there's going to be fees when you buy, when you sell, and when you own. And so you want to make sure that you understand that there's a lot of different terms for each one of those. There's commissions for when you buy, front end sales loads for when you buy. There's going to be something called redemption fees and surrender charges when you sell. And those surrender charges, especially for variable annuities, like I said, and equity indexed annuities, those can be decades long, sometimes 6 years, sometimes 15 years. It just depends. Redemption fees when you want to, get out of your mutual fund or move into a different mutual fund, there's going to be fees. Sometimes not, but you want to make sure you know what you're getting into. And then when you own, a lot of times people are surprised that there are fees to own an investment in a mutual fund or an annuity, but there are, they have to run the actual investment. So there's going to be annual operating expenses, management fees, administration fees, just to operate the actual investment. So, and that's usually going to be a pretty small percentage, but you want to be aware of what that is because it can be very different and it can take a big bite out of your investment. Okay, next slide. I'm going to speed it along because I'm eating into some of Lisa's time. So, and what is an investment fee? Fees and expenses can be different from the investment product to investment product. So you want to make sure that you know what the differences are, and the small differences in fees can translate into large differences in returns over time. And that's something that Dan illustrated really well in his presentation. Investment products with higher fees must perform better than investment products with lower fees to generate the same returns. This is the Ashley Frank, absolutely the Ashley Frank example. And then if you go to the next slide, We have a less concerning example. It's only 30,000, not 306,000. But as you can see here, the green line is showing a full point fee. The blue line is a quarter point annual fee, and the red line is a half point fee. And that's going to result in 30 grand over 20 years, a difference. And it's just, it doesn't seem like it's that much of a difference, right? Like as Dan was saying, it seems like it could be very small, but it can make a huge difference at the end of your investment term. Let's see. And we've talked about making sure, you understand and compare the fees you'll be charged and how much it's going to take a bite out of your return. In his example, it's 30 grand. You just want to make sure so that you can save. Every penny counts, and you want to make sure you save as much money as you can in the long run. So next slide, please. So this is a little bit of a recap. For mutual funds, we have commission and markup, front load. So this is the time at the point when you're buying the mutual fund. Sometimes there's no loads, but you really got to make sure what you're buying from your vendor is either, if you want a no load, you don't want any fees up front, make sure because they're going to mostly charge a front load. A back end load, it's a surrender charge. It's like a surrender charge for annuity. Contingent deferred sales charges. So that's a really fancy way to say if you sell too early before the redemption period, that they will charge you a little bit of a percentage, and that can be a lot of money if you do it too early. A redemption fee, again, it's another type of fee for mutual. When they charge you to get out of the actual mutual fund. And as we talked about, ongoing fees, investment advisory fees, management fees, custodial fees, other admin costs to operate the fund. You just want to make sure you know what your fees are. Next slide. And this is just a summary of the variable annuity fees. We talked about surrender charges, administrative fees, underlying fund expenses, sales loads, transfers, on and on and on. I know you're thinking fees, fees, fees. It's mostly just to make sure that you know that there are going to be a lot of fees, and that you want to make sure you know what those fees are so that you can kind of predict. You want them to be you want the fees to be as low as possible so that you get the best return at the end. Some people are okay with fees, but what we want to give you here is the knowledge and to understand what those fees are, and to make sure that you're not afraid to ask questions, to give you the confidence to make that extra effort to do the research and to ask questions. I know that a lot of times when people are going into the lunchrooms and they're saying, oh, you got to invest now, it's a great deal, great deal. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to rush into anything. You can just take a piece of paper and walk away with it, read about it, mull it over. There's absolutely no need to invest now. If anybody says there is, they're not telling you the truth. Next slide, please. So fees and expenses can take a huge bite out of your returns. Make sure you understand and compare the fees, and it will save you money. And I'm going to hand it off to Lisa for the next couple of slides.
We've only got 4 minutes, so I'll go very quickly. These are steps that you need to take, because we can't help you not be a victim of fraud. We can only provide you with tools so that you can protect yourself. So you must research your investment products. You can do that on our website, investor.gov. You can research your financial professional. Our website, investor.gov, has a landing page that gives you information. As soon as you put up a professional's name, you must make sure that the person is registered with the SEC. And for example, if you're familiar with Wolf of Wall Street and you put in the name Jordan Belfort, it'll immediately pop up that he's been barred. So go on investor.gov, right on the landing page, put in the person that you're dealing with so that you know a little bit about that person. You should be aware of common persuasion tactics and red flags. We'll cover that in a second. And be alert to common investment scams. That's why it's good to be in Facebook groups, to talk amongst yourselves, because that's how you learn. Somebody says, you know, this is what happened to me. And then somebody says, oh, wow, I didn't check. I should have checked. And, you know, you can get in and out of things. But before you invest, ask and check. Next slide. Ask questions. Do your own research. Sometimes a simple Google search will provide you with information that will help you make a decision. And hindsight's always 20/20. We know we work on cases where people say, if had I done a Google search, I would have realized that this person was doing this to other people and was fraudulent. Next slide. Is the product registered? What fees will I pay? Is the salesperson registered? How does my salesperson get paid? And like Jill said, we want you to have the confidence to ask these questions. If the guy in the lunchroom is so rude that he will not answer these questions, this is not a person you want to deal with. You don't have to invest right then and there. So if you say, well, how is it that you get paid? And they're hemming and hawing, this is not, then I can't invest with you unless I'm 100% sure, because it's your money and it's your retirement that you're trying to save up for. Next slide. So now I'll turn it back to Jill. We've got 1 minute, Jill.
Okay. All right. I'll be fast. Are we on slide 30? Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to buzz through this. We talked about what fees I will pay. You just want to make sure you know what fees, and you want to make sure that they can answer that question. So if you, and this is to tag on to something that Lisa said, if you are asking questions, whatever questions they are, and they will not answer them, or you do not understand what their answer is, you keep asking until you understand. I think Lisa said something at the beginning. If you don't understand when you're investing in, you shouldn't be investing in it. Slide 31, please. We talk, once again, you talk about fees. So you want to ask if they're going to appear on your account statement or the confirmation. You want to know what products will meet your personal financial objectives. And if they're trying to sell you something, do you have some? Ask them if they have something that is going to cost less. Next slide. We're just going to fly through these. 32. Always ask if there's a penalty if you sell, and that's to go to the surrender charges, the contingent deferred sales load for mutual funds, and redemption fees. And then number 33. So with variable annuities, you always want to ask about fees and expenses because it's not super clear. And I would say this is true for all annuities. Always ask about the different features and what you're paying for. Ask if they have a prospectus and ask for a copy of it. And ask questions if you don't understand, and keep asking until you understand or don't invest. With your investment professional, we already talked about how do you get paid? Do you make more money on one product over another? And you need getting kind of selling compensation. Next slide, 35. Okay. How long have you been in business? Are you licensed? If you're working for a brokerage, are you licensed with FINRA? If you're with an investment advisor, are you licensed with the SEC? Do you have a disciplinary history? Maybe some of those folks coming into the lunchroom have cheated some people and they have a disciplinary history. You want to ask. You can also research that. If you go to slide 36, this is our webpage, investor.gov. As Lisa said, you can just type someone's name in, you can get the information, whether they're at FINRA or whether they're registered with the SEC. And go to slide 37. Can I still go, or do we need to time out here?
We should probably time out.
Okay.
Yeah. So if there's any, maybe 30 more seconds, if you want to wrap something up here. And,
yeah, sure. Just basically, I'm going to go back to the slide for investor.gov. You go back to slide 36. This is our big push here, 36. Use this to research different types of products. Use this to research different types of different professionals, and look on this page regularly. We also have a teachers page on here, investor.gov/teachers. There are podcasts specifically for 403Bs, which you can find all coming from this page. So And that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, she mentioned it right there at the end, but I'll share it with you with a follow-up. But they do have a special page just for teachers. They have a special guide just for teachers. I actually have some physical copies of it that Lisa brought me one time when she came. I will, at the session on 4:30, I will have some copies of that if somebody want to pick it up. But it's free digitally on the investor.gov website. So check it out there. So yes, we're up against our time here. So, a huge thank you to Jill and Lisa for joining us. We can't thank you enough for spending the time with our educators here in our district. It's incredibly helpful, the information that you shared today. If you enjoyed their presentation, which I'm sure you did, don't forget they're going to be back on April 15th. So hopefully I'll see you again Monday the 15th, another virtual session. Sign up via e-learning. I'm going to follow up tomorrow. I'll give you a lot more information, and then also the session on 4:30, which will be in person on the FRS. So I don't want to take up any more of your time. I will let you go, but I will follow up either tomorrow or the next day with an additional email with all this info. If anybody has any pressing questions they really want to answer, I'll be here for a little bit longer. Jill and Lisa may be here, but if not, one of us will be here to answer a question if you have it. But otherwise, I so very much appreciate you taking 2 hours out of your very busy schedules here to spend with us. So I hope you found it useful, and spread the word to others, and hopefully we can get our teachers financially literate. So much appreciated. So everybody have a good night.